They died between the sacred walls of the Church of God, and they were discussing the eternal meaning of love. This stands out as a beautiful, beautiful thing for all generations. Shakespeare had Horatio to say some beautiful words as he stood over the dead body of Hamlet. And today, as I stand over the remains of these beautiful, darling girls, I paraphrase the words of Shakespeare. Good night, sweet princesses.
I am currently taking a class called Journey Towards Justice, and it is about exploring the civil rights movement through a deeper, more connective lens, bringing people to understanding the civil rights movement in a more interactive way other than just reading it through a textbook. So throughout the course, we've been reading things from Danielle McGuire that kind of inspire a little more thinking than we're usually used to. We also went up to Alabama, we went to Selma, Montgomery, and Birmingham, and we kind of got to experience the civil rights movement firsthand by interacting with museums and with artifacts that we can't really see through a textbook. Hi, I'm Laila Farhat. I am a senior. I am currently pursuing a concurrent degree in political science and international studies with an Africana Studies minor and a Latin American and Caribbean Studies certificate. The bombing at the 16th Street Baptist Church on the morning of September 15, 1963, killing 4 girls, injuring 1 other little girl. Through documentaries like Eyes on the Prize, you see the feeling that civil rights leaders like Dr. King had. A feeling of frustration, anger, confusion. How could this happen to 4 little girls? 4 little pieces of innocence. 4 sweet princesses. That same feeling resonated with the entirety of the Black community and is still present today. 3 days later, on September 18th, the funeral for 3 of the 4 girls was held with 4,000 people in attendance. The eulogy was delivered by Dr. Martin Luther King. The bombing of the 4 little girls moved people, moved communities, moved civil rights leaders, and as a result, also moved the KKK. The impact of the bombing and following events, such as the funeral and the eulogy, transcended the city limits of Birmingham, leading to the uprising of white supremacist groups such as the KKK to protect the image of white supremacy and further reestablishing the exclusivity of a nation. Furthermore, it rallied up prominent civil rights leaders such as Robert B. Hayling, the youth council advisor to the NAACP St. Augustine branch. I think walking into the 16th Street Baptist Church, the one word I can describe was heavy. It brought everything that we had learned about the 16th Street Baptist Church to life. You felt the energy, you felt the presence of the 4 little girls. You felt joy, you felt how they were feeling that day. It was youth day at the church that day, so it felt like they were experiencing joy together. And then you instantly felt heavy. 4 little innocent girls were killed. And that weighed a lot on me. In regards to the eulogy, I think one of the main things that really resonated with me was towards the end, he closes off his eulogy with "Good night, princesses. Good night, sweet princesses." And I think that really encapsulates their innocence and how they were just 4 little girls, and yet the entire world didn't see that. After the bombing and after the funeral, you had people such as MLK who felt this anger and frustration, but on the other side, you had members of the Klan, for instance, who didn't feel that. They talked down upon the little girls, they called them less than animals, they called them less than human. They questioned the innocence of the 4 little girls. They inherently denied them of their innocence. And yet the KKK couldn't grasp the feeling of innocence. They couldn't fathom the idea that a Black person can be innocent, much less a child. Hours after the eulogy, 530 miles away, a Klan rally would be held in St. Augustine, Florida, in retaliation to the massive support from the funeral. Invited to the rally is a minister out of California with associations to Alabama, a KKK leader by the name of Connie Lynch. He begins his speech, "My friends, I want to share with you something of the history, the glorious history of the Klan. The Klan was born out of the bloodshed of a real need to protect the Southern white man from the carpetbaggers." Then he shifts his focus to the 4 little girls killed in the bombing just 3 days prior. With pride, he says to the congregated white mass, "So I'll kill 'em all. If there's 4 little less N-words tonight, I say good for whoever planted the bomb. We're all better off." Lynch goes on to defend white violence. He describes the 4 little girls. They weren't children. Children are little people, little human beings, and that means white people. There's little monkeys, but you don't call them children. You just call them little monkeys. And he goes on. There's also little N-words, but they ain't children. They're just little N-words. The words are dehumanizing, demoralizing, disheartening, but in the white man's reality, it was the one thing to live for. The hurt and the violence of blacks, no matter their age, was the inherent goal. The one way to keep white supremacy alive. They didn't see them as children, much less human. They were less than animals. By 1963, St. Augustine had increased in racial tensions, and they were getting ready to celebrate the 400th anniversary of the nation's oldest city. And within the planning, many black folks were left out of the planning process, even though they had contributed to the St. Augustine community, and they were working there, they were living there, they had lives there, and yet they couldn't even plan the celebration. So segregation was very prominent within St. Augustine, as was prominent within most towns in the South, and a report from the Florida State Advisory Committee on Civil Rights called the racial conditions in St. Augustine considerably worse than in most, if not all, other cities in the state, kind of hinting towards the actual racial tensions within the city. And it wasn't just peaceful or tranquil, as the mayor would say, but there were actual forms of segregation within the city, and that hurt actual people's lives. Within this whole process of trying to manage racial tensions within the city, you have prominent black leaders who want to get involved, and they set up meetings with sitting commissions and city managers, and most times, if not many times, they get met with a tape recorder, and they don't talk to people who are leading the city, they talk to a tape recorder, and all that happens is they receive information that the city is peaceful and tranquil, and it's not in fact. They are facing real problems, and they are getting injured, and personal effects are getting taken, and they as people are being violated. On July 23, 1963, 16 black youths were participating in a sit-in to desegregate a Woolworth's lunch counter, and were arrested by St. Augustine police. 4 out of the 16 were juveniles who continued to fight for their rights, refusing to sign a form restricting the rights. Those 4 came to be known as the St. Augustine 4. In the broad story of St. Augustine's civil rights, one person stands out to me, and that is Dr. Robert B. Hayling. Dr. Hayling is a Tallahassee native and a dentist who went out of state using segregation scholarships to get his dentistry degrees, and comes back to Florida and lands on St. Augustine, Florida to kind of open up his practice and to help young children and adults get dental care. And he ran integrated dentist offices and waiting rooms, which kind of brought light to integration in St. Augustine. Frustration really came from running an integrated waiting room in St. Augustine, which is a segregated city. It was really frustrating, and you have youths also getting frustrated by the nature of segregation within St. Augustine, and they come up to Hayling and they're like, "Hey, can you help us run the youth portion of the NAACP in St. Augustine?" So he approves and he agrees, and he becomes the youth council advisor to the NAACP in St. Augustine. And it just explodes from there. One of the explosions of the movement happens July 2nd, 1963, where Hayling's personal home was shot up by the Klan in retaliation for all the work he had done in St. Augustine at that point. He had contributed to the movement largely, and he had really helped the youth kind of come together for a purpose, and that was to gain freedom and to gain integration towards the end. And the Klan felt targeted and attacked by that, so they attacked his personal home. So at that point, no one had gotten hurt. Hayling wasn't shot or anything. I believe a couple of the boys were shot, but no major injuries from that. The St. Augustine racial tensions grew so big, the city of St. Augustine would soon be called the Birmingham of Florida, and Hayling would embody the spirit of MLK in St. Augustine. Hayling was ambitious for his people's freedom through integration, hoping one day to lead to liberation. But Hayling faced opposition and resistance from the white community and from some black leaders. Field Secretary of the Florida NAACP, Robert Saunders, often questioned Hayling's actions and choices. Some leaders in the NAACP inside and outside of Florida disapproved Hayling's confidence in his strategy. He had been described as overestimating the federal influence and interest in certain problems. Hayling seemed to be critical of the actions done by the feds. But among black people in St. Augustine, Hayling was respected as the backbone for the movement to lean on. Everyone in the community knew him and trusted that he was a go-getter who didn't wait for anyone's approval. Leaders of the NAACP operated within certain structures and grew frustrated with Hayling's strategy of direct confrontation with white leaders. In one internal message of the NAACP papers, they wrote that Hayling has been somewhat critical of our handlings of his requests, also of Bob Saunders. Nevertheless, he continuously pushed for the NAACP to support efforts in St. Augustine. In months to come, Saunders would further question Hayling and blame him for the races not being able to come together in St. Augustine. Hayling didn't want to stop. The bombing of the 4 little girls in Birmingham emboldened him further. He was pulling the strings of all sides, and I think white terrorists specifically felt threatened by him. They felt that community was able to be built within black folks, and they saw Hayling as the problem. They saw him as the instigator. They saw him being able to bring in youths and people of all ages even to come together for one cause, and they felt threatened. And it was no surprise that Connie Lynch would mention Hayling in his speech, begging for his blood. He says, "He's got no right to live at all, let alone walk up and down your streets and breathe the white man's free air." Throughout Hayling's organization and his actions within the movement in St. Augustine, he was strategic, he was organized, he was calculated in his movements. And at that point, he no longer feared this idea of the invisible army of the Klan. He, as well as other civil rights leaders such as MLK, were furious, they were frustrated, they were angry that 4 little girls were killed. The Klan also felt moved. They organized a rally in response to the eulogy presented by Dr. King. The rally was held 2 miles away from St. Augustine, off the road of US 1. According to a newspaper reporting from the Tallahassee Democrat, the Klan had distributed leaflets promoting the rally, stating the Klan has advertised the meetings Wednesday night and tonight, inviting the public to attend. The Klan rally was not planned in advance, rather as a reaction to the outturn of the funeral. Some 300 people showed up, many from out of the county and from Jacksonville. Given the rush job of the rally, Hayling's response was quick, calling news stations based in Jacksonville at 7 p.m. that night to inform them that there might be some news interest, providing them with detailed directions to the rally's location, gathered from publicity of the Klan. The Klan rally would occur at 8 p.m. on that Wednesday night. Hayling and 3 others, James Jackson, James Hauser, and Clyde Jenkins, drove to the rally and were trapped in by Klan members at gunpoint. The driver Hauser attempted to drive away. The 4 black men found themselves trapped by a ditch or a trench of some sort. Unable to escape, the 3 men were dragged by Klan members onto the stage and piled up like cordwood on top of each other, semi-conscious in front of hundreds, waiting for their blood. The men were then beaten with chains, baseball bats, brass knuckles, and axe handles, all while being held at gunpoint. After they were dragged out of the car and put onto the stage, Hayling and all the others sustained severe injuries. Hayling having 11 teeth knocked out and 14 stitches to the head, and both of his wrists were out of commission. The men were hospitalized for up to 12 days, and the media reports only minor injuries. And while on stage, the crowd had asked if anyone had ever had the privilege of smelling an N-word burn. The response being no, and they sent someone to get an accelerant. It was the crowd's intent to douse the men with gasoline and set them on fire. Before that could ensue, the sheriff, L.O. Davis, was called. The sheriff arrested only 4 white KKK members: DeWitt Wade Stringfield, Lawrence Allen Besant, Clarence Oscar Wilson, and Jarman Davis. The men were held on $100 bond, but Hayling was the one convicted by an all-white jury of assault on 2 white Klansmen during the rally, despite evidence proving otherwise. Hayling was sentenced to 60 days in jail and fined $100, which he appealed. Throughout the struggle for freedom, Birmingham coined the name Bombingham, having more unsolved bombings of homes and churches than any other city in the nation. St. Augustine was not too far behind. The choices made by people on that Wednesday evening of the Klan rally were not made out of the blue. Both the Klansmen and Black civil rights activists were directly responding to tragic events, but for entirely different reasons. Hayling decided he would not let the Klan go unchallenged. After finding out that the Klan was holding an impromptu rally through advertisement, he called the news stations. Even though the local media had been unfriendly towards Black civil rights leaders, and Hayling in particular, it seemed like he wanted to bring national attention to the white supremacist movement in St. Augustine. I think Hayling was a strategic person, so he contacted the media for one reason, and I think that was to specifically bring attention to him being there. He wanted to be there, he wanted to see what the Klan was thinking, and he wanted to see what the response of the Klan would be if the media were to reach out to the Klan and warn them that Hayling would be there. And that's what we got. We got the response of the Klan, and that was to trap Hayling and the 3 others with him and have the intent to kill him. Hayling wanted to show the world and St. Augustine that there were true racial tensions within the city. He wanted to show the evil of the KKK within St. Augustine. He wanted to show that it wasn't just happening in Birmingham, it was happening in St. Augustine, and it was happening to him and to so many others. I think the media did inform the Klan. They weren't known to be a trusted source. It was in their best interest to warn the Klan because they would also get rid of Hayling and they would have a little bit of peace within the media. And with the Klan's direct connection with the media, they were able to know his car, they were able to create a barrier well in advance, which prohibited Hayling and the 3 other men from fleeing, trapping them in. Furthermore, there's a high chance that Connie Lynch knew Hayling's eventual arrival, thus he mentioned Hayling directly in a speech calling for his blood. Knowing the risks he faced, Hayling was still a model of courage. He wanted to show the world that evil was not just in Birmingham, it transcended borders and was happening in St. Augustine too. He didn't know what would happen, but he knew something would happen. The Klan attack showed St. Augustine the true faces behind the white hoods, the faces of evil, who simply could not comprehend the innocence of Black children. Arguably, the Klan rally and attack on Hayling catapulted the St. Augustine movement. It brought attention to St. Augustine, even as it placed a bigger target on Hayling's back. I want people to see the innocence of the 4 little girls, like I saw the innocence of the 4 little girls. I want them to see the movement of people from all sides, whether it was the Black civil rights movement, whether it was the people on the ground, whether it was the KKK. Everyone was touched and moved by the killing of 4 little girls, whether it was to call for more freedom and for more liberation, or it was to kind of put the movement down. There was movement from all sides. I think Hayling felt anger. He felt frustration. At that time, I believe he had 2 daughters. So he must have felt like those were his own kids that had been killed, right? So he not only had that direct attachment because he was a father, but he also saw so many others that were moved, and he wanted to do something. And that something was showing up to the Klan rally. I think it's important to note that the next day, even more people showed up to the Klan rally, and I think it shows that Connie Lynch and so many others did not see these 4 little girls as 4 little girls. He saw them as a threat. He saw them as less than human and less than animals, and he explicitly says that. He says what a lot of white people were feeling at that time, and that was threatened. They were scared that this new community would be built around these 4 little girls to come together and to fight for freedom. And that was threatening to them and their image and their nation. It was threatening that. I think an image St. Augustine tried to project for itself was one of prosperity, for one, because they had a booming economic market based on tourism. So they were trying to show an image of peacefulness and not of the evils of St. Augustine. They were trying to show, hey, we're the oldest city in the nation. We're cool. We don't have this thing called racial strife. We're peaceful. We live with our black neighbors and we work with them. And that is the image that St. Augustine tried to show. Yet behind the curtain, that wasn't happening at all. You have massive tension between the mayor and the sheriff and civil rights leaders like Hayling. There was massive tension between the two, and those always collided. I think for me, the 4 little girls represent innocence. They also represent community. They brought together people who might have felt broken apart, and everyone came together to support them. And for MLK and other civil rights leaders and other men who were fathers, they felt like 4 sweet princesses were dead. And those could have been their daughters. So they felt like they had to go and rush out, and they had to go and show support, and they had to fight against this evil, which was people like Connie Lynch on the other side, who called them dehumanizing names and stripped them of their inherent innocence. They were 4 black little girls. They were children. And that side just couldn't see it. The 4 little girls were an embodiment of love. They gave the world love, joy, happiness, and community. Good night, sweet princesses. I'm gonna cry, okay. Good night, sweet princesses.